This message comes from NPR sponsor Rosetta Stone, an expert in language learning for 30 years. Right now, NPR listeners can get Rosetta Stone's lifetime membership to 25 different languages for 50% off. Learn more at rosettastone.com/NPR.
Hola, mi gente. I'm Lori Lizarraga, and you're listening to Ask Code Switch, the show where we tackle your questions about race and identity. You know, the kind of questions that you can really only ask Code Switch. Now, today's caller question has us thinking about the influence that race and class have on your tongue. So stay with me. I'm not talking about the church variety of speaking in tongues. And no, this is not an episode for you and your partner. That's next week. I'm talking about the literal function of your tongue. Taste.
Hi, Code Switch. My name is Anton Aliquin, and I'm calling from Washington, D.C. I grew up in Hershey, Pennsylvania, which is a predominantly white town. My parents immigrated from the Philippines, and being in a predominantly white area, one of the only ways that we could stay connected with our Filipino culture was food. Growing up, I felt very insecure about my food preferences versus my white friends' food preferences. And I think I started developing a understanding or perception that food preferences were stratified based on race. When I moved to a city that was more diverse, I started seeing that that wasn't necessarily always the case. And so I wanted to know more about the historical context and the social context behind food preferences. Like, how do race and class affect food preference? And what makes a picky eater versus a non-picky eater?
Today on Ask Code Switch, we're talking about taste and all the things that shape and change your taste buds, from the genes you inherit to falling in love. We're getting into all that right after this.
This message comes from NPR sponsor REI Co-op. For the next half minute, REI wants to remind you that you can't make more time, but you can make the most of it by calling timeout. Timeout on the algorithms, comfort zones, and life on autopilot. REI believes that getting outside is the best way to get out of our routines and instead find new routes. When you're ready, they have the gear, clothing, classes, and advice to get you started. Visit your local REI co-op or rei.com/opt-outside. This message comes from Viking, committed to exploring the world in comfort. Journey through the heart of Europe on an elegant Viking longship with thoughtful service, destination-focused dining, and cultural enrichment on board and on shore. And every Viking voyage is all-inclusive with no children and no casinos. Discover more at Viking.com. This message comes from Progressive. What if comparing car insurance rates was as easy as putting on your favorite podcast? With Progressive, it is. Just visit their website to get a quote with all the coverages you want. You'll see Progressive's direct rate, and their tool will provide options from other companies so you can compare. Then just choose the rate and coverage you like. Quote today at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Squarespace. Kickstart or update written content on any website, product description, or email with Squarespace AI, generating instant, personalized results that know and show your brand identity. Explain what your site is about, choose your tone, and enter what you need to get short or long-form text. No matter the placement, Squarespace AI makes it easier to go live, stand out, and succeed online. Use code NPR to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain.
This election season, you can expect to hear a lot of news, some of it meaningful, much of it not. Give the Up First podcast 15 minutes, sometimes a little less, and we'll help you sort it out, what's going on around the world and at home. 3 stories, 15 minutes, Up First every day. Listen every morning wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Lori. This is Ask Code Switch. Okay, today our question comes from caller Anton Aliquin in Washington, D.C.
My question is, are food preferences more a function of race or class? Poorer folks versus wealthier folks being picky eaters, or black and brown folks versus white folks being picky eaters?
It's such a great question, and there's no simple or easy answer.
Turns out, a British food writer from Cambridge has been thinking about this for a long time.
My name's Bea Wilson. I've written several books on food-related topics,
including a book called First Bite: How We Learn to Eat,
which is about human taste preferences and where they come from.
Bea told me her hunch when she first started this research was that food preference was mostly genetic. Some people, she thought, were just born picky eaters.
And I partly had this hunch because I have 3 kids and they all ate in radically different ways, even though I felt I'd fed them, roughly speaking, the same. And what I did discover is there is a genetic component to what we are going to bring to those early experiences. We know people who study babies, twin studies show some people actually enjoy food more right from the beginning, right when it's just the milk stage. Some babies are more eager to eat than others, which is kind of mind-blowing. It kind of fits. I feel like I'm definitely one of the people who enjoyed it, greedy from the beginning, always thinking about the next meal. So that shows people are different.
So genes can play a role, but they don't predetermine whether you'll be a picky eater, right? I mean, it's right there in the title of your book. The discovery you made while studying taste is that we learn how to eat.
We learn how to eat, that it's environment, it's culture, it's all of these messages we're sent about foods. So someone that's grown up in a household eating Japanese food is going to have a different bunch of experiences compared to someone who's Italian, American or Hispanic. There are picky eating kids in every class, in every social background. But we do know that low-income kids have a higher risk of growing up picky. And there was one study in the Boston area where they interviewed caregivers. And the caregivers on low incomes, they couldn't risk buying a load of food.
Yes, there was this one question where the interviewer said, if you knew your child would like cauliflower if you offered it to them 10 times, would you try? And they were like, no, I can't afford to waste cauliflower.
And we know that the way to get kids to be less picky is to expose them. But that's not a privilege that everyone has. And then if you're living in a food desert where it's harder to access the fresh foods, and if you're living in really poor housing where maybe you only have a microwave, of course you're going to be buying your kids frozen nuggets and Hot Pockets and whatever else. And it's not that easy to make them some beautiful steamed broccoli seasoned in whatever fancy way.
You're making such an interesting argument for this as a social justice issue, that the opportunity to eat healthy or at least be exposed to different kinds of healthy food is a human right that should be equal opportunity.
Exactly.
So what are the other big influences you found that shape how we eat, Bea?
We're all learning to eat in some kind of family unit. And the thing is, our parents and our siblings, indeed, are supplying us with nature and nurture at the same time.
I'm one of 5, so I definitely get that.
So you would have totally learned from brothers, sisters. There was a really interesting study on this about Mexico and the acquisition of chili eating, which is one of those really interesting questions because chili actually hurts. Like, it doesn't seem like at a kind of evolutionary basis, why would human beings eat something that gives them pain? But then obviously people who learn to love chili really love it.
I would definitely be one of those people. And to your point of learning taste, my partner is Colombian, but spice is really from my Mexican roots. And when I first started dating him, he was like not a fan of any of the hot sauce or the hot Cheetos or all of the spicy things that I would put on food. And now he can't eat a meal without tapatio or some sort of jalapeno or red chili pepper flakes.
Because of you, he loves you, so now he loves the spice.
And because it's great.
Most of what we talk about as preference is really familiarity.
Sure.
It's what you're exposed to, and what you're exposed to at that young age, surrounded by love and nurture and all of those other things in a family is really profound. And often those early influences stay with us. But as your partner's experience shows, there are these little windows, and falling in love is one of the beautiful windows where you might learn new tastes.
After publishing First Bite, Bee's research about taste led her to start a food education charity called Taste Ed, a program that introduces young kids to different fresh fruits and vegetables that they might not have otherwise been exposed to. Through that program, Bee made her next big discovery about how much taste has to do with memory.
One of the things we do is we bring in bunches of fresh mint and ask them what they remember. And every single child will have a different mint memory. And there may be kids, this is from talking about UK schools, so it may have sort of different ethnic backgrounds from you might have in a US school, but lots of kids in this particular school whose background was Turkish or Moroccan, who were just like, that is my grandmother. They didn't even say it reminds me of my grandmother. It's just like, that is my grandmother and that is her tea. So suddenly the other kids have heard this really beautiful, happy memory. I mean, memory is environment, culture, background, all of these other things. Memory is experience. We've all got this powerful bank of food memories that we're kind of imprinted with. So if we're going to change our preferences and if we are picky, it's quite a big thing. It's not just something mechanical. It's about emotions.
What does it take for someone to learn to like a certain kind of food? Can an acquired taste actually happen, especially in adulthood when we're much less, I guess, malleable or willing to change our palates?
It can totally happen. I mean, actually, in my latest book, which is a cookbook called The Secret of Cooking, I have a little section called A Recipe for Learning New Tastes, where I'm trying to answer exactly this question. And there are a bunch of different approaches. So one of them, which is well tested in the literature, is flavour pairing. So this is kind of coming back to our conversation about chili, which may be also what happened with your partner. If you put a food that you love with one of the foods that you're trying to learn to love, eventually, over time, the good kind of rubs off on the bad.
Interesting.
And you associate the two as going together.
That's so interesting. We can play little psychological games with ourselves, and that actually might then help us acquire the taste.
Absolutely. And I think the thing you have to know at any age is that insofar as there is a silver bullet that's going to make you learn to love something, it's exposure. But the catch-22 is, how do you expose yourself to something in a positive way if you hate it? Like we were talking, weren't we? Tomatoes is still not your favourite food. If you're looking at tomatoes and the very smell is making you feel quite upset, that's not a positive situation already. So you have to kind of figure out a way to get beyond that. And something that I wrote about that was pioneered by a psychologist called Lucy Cook, who works with a hospital in London. She did this thing called tiny tastes, where if you make the food as small as a grain of rice or as small as a pea, you probably could try it. Like if it's not a whole tomato, but that small, and then just keep trying it, keep smelling it, and you might surprise yourself.
I think that's my favorite thing Bee said, that our food preferences can change. New experiences, new memories, new people and places can all still influence your palate, and new tastes really can be acquired. So in answer to your question, Anton, food preference is based on a lot of things, including necessity, dash of genetics, gender, culture, access, memory, ethnicity, and class. And while some people might start out life as picky eaters, that doesn't mean picky eating is their destiny. Taste is as much passed on as it is predicated by our place in the world. So maybe those white kids you grew up with in Hershey have also moved to new places, traveled abroad, met new people, fallen in love, and tried mole, or the Malaysian kind of carrot cake. I don't know, pho. And PSA, if you haven't tried all those foods, what are you waiting for? Remember, you're the captain of your own taste boat, baby. Sail those seas. And that's our show. You can send us your Ask Code Switch questions on Instagram at NPR Code Switch. If email's more your thing, ours is codeswitch@npr.org. And subscribe to the podcast on the NPR app or wherever you're listening right now. If you'd like to support our work, you can sign up for Code Switch Plus. It's small, but really makes a difference for us, and you'll get to listen to every Code Switch episode without any ad breaks. Check it out at plus.npr.org/codeswitch. And thanks to everyone who's already a Code Switch Plus subscriber. This episode was produced by Skylar Swenson. It was edited by Leah Donnella. Our fact check was done by Aida Porrasad. Our engineer was James Willits. And a big thanks to our listener, Anton, for sending us this question. Also, want to say a special thanks to Lauren Gonzalez, our project manager, as well as Cher Vincent, Yolanda Sanguini, and the entire content development team for helping make this series possible. Finally, a big shout out to the rest of the Code Switch Massive: Christina Cala, Javier Lopez, Jess Kung, Courtney Stein, Dahlia Mortada, Verilyn Williams, Jean Demby, and B.A. Parker. This is Ask Code Switch. I'm Lori Lizarraga. Call your mama.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Mint Mobile. From the gas pump to the grocery store, inflation is everywhere. So Mint Mobile is offering premium wireless starting at just $15 a month. To get your new phone plan for just $15, go to mintmobile.com/switch.
This message comes from Viking, committed to exploring the world in comfort. Journey through the heart of Europe on an elegant Viking longship with thoughtful service, destination-focused dining, and cultural enrichment on board and on shore. And every Viking voyage is all-inclusive with no children and no casinos. Discover more at Viking.com.